William Bradford reflected on the hardships of the first winter at Plymouth Harbor. He wrote, "Most sad and lamentable was, that in 2 or 3 months' time, half of their company died, especially in January and February, being the depth of winter, and wanting houses and other comforts." It's Christmas night, 1620. The Mayflower is off the coast of modern Massachusetts, in the harbor that will soon be called Plymouth. We will take a closer look at Plymouth Harbor. The passengers have crossed the ocean and now have found a suitable place for a settlement. Now comes the challenge of building a town in the middle of winter. Until the houses are constructed, the ship will remain the primary shelter for the passengers. While the community has been on a ship now since September, they maintain the structure of a society. The Mayflower Compact is their social contract, and John Carver has been selected their governor. On the bottom right we have 2 dates. On the top is the Julian or Old Style calendar, abbreviated here as OS, used by the Pilgrims and the English-speaking world, which was 10 days different from the Gregorian calendar date shown below. The Gregorian or New Style calendar, abbreviated here as NS, was used by much of Europe and is the date used today. The New Style and Old Style calendars differ by 10 days. Most of the pilgrims and non-pilgrim strangers on Christmas night are aboard the Mayflower. After crossing the Atlantic Ocean, they have spent over a month searching Cape Cod Bay for a settlement. It was decided that this location at Plymouth Harbor was the best site for a settlement. Some 20 men are on shore keeping guard over the planned settlement site, while the remainder of the pilgrims are on the Mayflower. The men on shore have built what they call a rendezvous, a small defensive house, where the 20 men on shore can have shelter and defense. The men know that their position is near what used to be farm fields for a previous native village, and they are watchful of Indian warriors. Morning arrives, December 26th. There is light, but the weather is too foul for the men to work on land. We will take a closer look at the location that the Englishmen have agreed to found their settlement. This is the modern town of Plymouth, Massachusetts. We can see modern Leyden Street here in yellow, which is a principal existing marker for early Plymouth plantation. Leyden Street has now been in use for over 400 years. We have removed the modern town of Plymouth, Massachusetts to get a view that is more like winter in 1620. The beach rises up to high ground that will later be called Coles Hill. Behind Coles Hill is Burial Hill or Fort Hill. A brook runs here. Across the brook, a third hill, known in the future as Watson Hill, is here. The men have already figured out that the high hill, later called Burial Hill or Fort Hill, will be the best place for defensive ordnance. Between Burial Hill and Coles Hill will be where the townhouses will be laid, and that is exactly where Leyden Street is today. Coles Hill is close to the water, but also on raised ground, and the defensible high point on Burial Hill makes this location suitable for a settlement. The men had recently built their rendezvous on the high ground above the brook, the small 3-sided blockhouse for defense. Additionally, they had started the first housing structure, a common house, meant to store goods. We will take a closer look at the English post near Coles Hill. It is winter, and the construction work suffers delays. They will call this settlement site a plantation, a term that had a different meaning in the 17th century. This term plantation in the 17th century means to plant a church community, which is a different meaning than what comes to mind about a 19th century cash crop plantation. So the Pilgrim plantation will be on the high ground north of the stream here. Let's go back to the sea. The Mayflower is too large a ship to bring the men ashore to work. Rather, a small boat, called a shallop, ferries the crew from ship to shore. The women and children remain on the Mayflower for shelter, while the able-bodied men ferry back and forth between the ship and the land to gather wood, cut planks, and prepare for construction. On December 27th, the weather is agreeable enough for the men to be on land at work. On December 28th, the men have decided that the settlement will have 2 rows of houses along a street. Thus, the high ground here, spanning from Coles Hill to Burial Hill, is plotted to be the site for the settlement. This planned street is future Leyden Street, named after the town the Pilgrims lived in during their years in Holland. Thus, Leyden Street is one of the oldest streets in North America that was made by the English, and possibly the oldest street still in use in British America. Also on December 28th, the Englishmen work out the logistics of the settlement. The Pilgrims require all single men to join a family in order to reduce the number of houses to be built. After the single men are adjoined to families, the number of houses to be built is decided at 19 houses. Larger families received larger plots. Lots were cast to determine which family received which plot. The building material will be timber harvested from the nearby forests. From English eyes in 1620, this land is full of trees. While many decisions are made on December 28th, an ominous sign is revealed. The cold and cramped quarters have weakened many passengers, young and old, male and female. Bradford and Winslow record that, considering the weakness of our people, many of them growing ill with colds, for our former discoveries in frost and storms and the waiting at Cape Cod had brought much weakness amongst us, which increased so every day more and more, and after was the cause of many of their deaths. Winter rain continues. Back on land, smoke from native camps is seen just 6 miles distant. It's now January 1621. In the old Julian calendar, the new year occurs in spring, but to avoid confusion, we will start the new year on January 1st. On January 3rd, on land, the men venture into nearby woods and gather thatch for construction. They are at unease, seeing native campfires nearby. The next day, January 4th, Miles Standish leads about 5 men to investigate the nearby fires. They find wigwams, but like the previous adventures along Cape Cod, there are homes but no inhabitants. Miles Standish shoots an eagle, providing fresh protein for the workers. Meanwhile, the wet, cold winter, combined with cramped quarters on the Mayflower, is festering illness. William Bradford notes that many are infected with scurvy and other diseases. On January 6th, Christopher Martin is very ill. Master Carver, the governor, speaks to him about his accounts. Soon, Christopher Martin, a central personality on the Mayflower, passes away. Martin's wife follows him into death. The great reaping has started. The living men, already tasked with building a settlement, have a new errand: digging graves for friends and family. But the English carry on. January 8th, Christopher Jones, the Mayflower captain, sends the shallop out to survey the waters for fishing. A storm breaks out. However, the shallop returns to the Mayflower with a great bounty: 3 seals and cod. The shallop crew inform the Mayflower that the waters are great for fishing. So there is strength and hope for the struggling travelers. Also, on January 8th, Francis Billington and a companion venture a few miles west from the building area, locating large lakes. The large lake will gain the name Billington Sea. The lake will be another source of fish and fowl. However, Billington and his companion are nervous, seeing several Indian houses. The houses appear uninhabited, but Billington prefers to be safe and return to the harbor. January 9th. The day is fair. The men have assembled between Coles Hill and Burial Hill, where the town has been plotted. The common house, which the men had started to build at Christmas, is nearly complete. It is 20 feet square, and just the roofing is needed. It is decided that each man should build his own house, and all would help with the common house. Thatch and mortar are needed for the roof. It's important to relate that these planned houses will not be log cabins. Log cabins are not English-style houses of the 17th century. Rather, Englishmen are accustomed to building houses of wattle and daub with wood clapboard siding. Wattle and daub construction is a centuries-old style in Germanic cultures. A timber frame is built. Then wattle or pole sticks are set up between the frame. The wattling or stick poles are woven together like a basket and plastered in place with daub. The siding is made of wood clapboard planks. So the horizontal siding on the walls is actually reminiscent of modern house siding today. The horizontal planks are the same fashion as today, just they're made from wood as opposed to modern vinyl. The roofs will be made of thatch and mud. In addition, the earth is too frozen, the necessity to build is too important, and the manpower is too short to build houses with deep stone foundations. Rather, the pilgrims of this generation will build an earth-fast house, where timber posts will be set into the ground like anchor posts, fastening the building to the ground. The men will do house construction when winter weather permits, which is about every other day. In the meantime, the Mayflower remains the chief shelter for families. On January 11th, Bradford joins many others in sickness. Bradford will recover in time. But the sickness among the passengers is taking a deadly toll. The number of hands to build the settlement grows smaller. And with so many buried now, the number of houses, originally scheduled for 19, begins to decrease. William Bradford is now one of the single men who will not have his own house. His wife, Dorothy, had recently perished. The same is true for Miles Standish, whose wife Rose has also died. But work continues. January 12th. 4 men are sent into the woods to cut and gather thatch for roofing material. They have a mastiff and spaniel with them. 2 of the men, John Goodman and Peter Brown, go further into the forest after the dogs. The other 2 workers soon follow after, but they cannot find Goodman or Brown. A search party assembles and goes out after the missing men. But the winter night comes fast, and John Goodman and Peter Brown are still missing. The next day, January 13th, fearful that Goodman and Brown had been captured by Indians, about 11 men arm themselves and go on a search party. But the party is unable to find the lost men. Night falls. Hope for the lost men grows dim. Then, in the dark, miraculously, Goodman and Brown return to the plantation. Goodman's feet are so swollen that his shoes are cut from his feet. Goodman and Brown relate what happened. The other day, while they were gathering thatch, the mastiff and spaniel had seen a deer, and the dogs chased after it. Goodman and Brown, in turn, chased after their dogs. Soon the men were lost in the wilderness, and the cold night fell. They had no shelter or musket. They heard lions nearby. In 1621, mountain lions as well as wolves and black bears covered large expanses of North America. So, lions, wolves, and bears were present in modern Massachusetts in 1621. The men climbed a tree, but it was too cold to remain in the tree. Goodman and Brown spent the night walking around the base of the tree to keep warm. At first light, they journeyed on, looking for a way home. Goodman and Brown are lucky. They survive the winter night in the elements. However, winter's reaping continues among the passengers. In January and February, 2 or 3 might die each day. On January 19th, John Goodman returns from the relative warmth of the Mayflower to the shore to test his feet. Goodman has a spaniel with him. He ventures a short distance from the plantation. In the woods, Goodman has another close call. The spaniel is ahead of Goodman. Then the dog comes running back with 2 wolves following after him. Goodman throws a stick at one of the wolves, but the wolves cycle back. Goodman grabs another stick and stands his ground. The wolves leave. On January 20th, the work crews complete a shed for common goods. There are now 2 buildings for common use. The common house, which at certain times functions as a clinic for the sick, and now a shed for shared provisions. The row of houses along future Leyden Street is under construction now. January 22nd, the men are at work on their houses. A hogshead of flour meal is brought from ship to shore. The men bring it to the common storehouse. Hogshead is a centuries-old English term for an amount similar to a large cask or barrel. On January 29th, the shallop brings more common goods from the Mayflower to the shore. Slowly but surely, the supplies and provisions on the Mayflower are being transferred from the ship to the shore and stored in the new communal buildings. The community is in transition from being a ship community to living on the shore. The next day, January 30th, Master Jones on the Mayflower spots 2 Indians on nearby Clark's Island. Meanwhile, back on shore, the house walls are slowly coming up, but setbacks remain. February 4th, rain and terrible wind damage the daubing on the houses. These storms are increasingly challenging for the Mayflower. She is much lighter now that much of the supplies have been removed to the land, so the passengers aboard are rocked fiercely by waves. Back on shore, the common house is needed as a clinic, separating the sick passengers from the ship. In the hard times of winter, with so many sick, on many days only 6 or 7 men are available for construction. Thus, in addition to construction, the few healthy men are also needed to care for the sick. These few workers make their fires, prepare their meals, make their beds, and wash their clothes. Bradford says that these few men did all the homely and necessary offices for them which dainty and queasy stomachs cannot endure to hear named, and all this willingly and cheerfully, without any grudging in the least, showing here in their true love unto their friends and brethren. Bradford gives special accolades to the work of Reverend William Brewster and Captain Miles Standish. Sickness also afflicts the Mayflower sailors. The ship's boatswain was a proud young man who had cursed and scoffed at the passengers, but he fell ill. Yet the Pilgrims aided him in his sickness despite the way he had treated them. The boatswain had a conversion of sorts, saying, "You, I now see, show your love like Christians, indeed, one to another, but we let one another lie and die like dogs." On February 9th, the English harvest 5 geese to distribute to the sick in the common house. February 16th, an Englishman has gone fowling. He is about 1.5 miles from the plantation. He hears something. The Englishman lays low and reads. He hears 12 natives pass by, with others following close behind. The Indians seem to be moving in the direction of the settlement. The man lays in the reeds until the sounds pass. Then he runs back to the plantation and gives the alarm, which brings in the other workers from the woods. The men arm, but no attack comes. However, when Miles Standish and Francis Cook return to their workstations, they report that the tools they left in the woods are missing. The Englishmen agree to keep stricter watch over their material and to make sure their muskets and powder are dry. In the evening, they see the fires of the natives in the distance. February 17th. In response to the increasing sightings of natives, the English name Miles Standish their official military captain. On this same day, the English see 2 natives on the high ground across the brook. They are on a hill that will later be called Watson's Hill. Both groups acknowledge each other. The English arm themselves. Miles Standish and Stephen Hopkins proceed from the plantation toward Watson's Hill. They cross the brook. They lay down their musket on the ground as a sign of peace. However, from behind the hill, hidden from view, comes the sound of a large number of Indians. The contact ends. Standish and Hopkins return to their side of the brook. The English determined to get their large gun pieces on Burial Hill. On February 21st, a large cannon, called a minion, is brought ashore and placed on Burial Hill. Another large gun is placed on the hill. The weapons are mounted on bases. On March 3rd, 1621, Winslow and Bradford note that the birds sang in the woods most pleasantly. Winter's grip is loosening. Thunderclaps and the promise of spring rain hangs in the air. So, as the birds begin to sing in March 1621, the community has suffered terribly through the winter, but the plantation has been founded. There are 7 houses, a common storehouse, and a street. 4 months earlier, about 100 men, women, and children had arrived across the Atlantic Ocean on the Mayflower. By March, only about 50 remain. Nevertheless, there is the hope of relief with the coming of warmer weather. In the wake of winter's reaping, Plymouth, the first English-speaking town north of Jamestown, is coming into shape. If we look at a contemporary map of Plymouth, we see Leyden Street here in yellow. Burial Hill is here. We will now show a reconstruction of the early community in its approximated location in March 1621. William Bradford sketched out the lots of the first-year settlers. The houses are set on the south side of Leyden Street. Another path was set parallel to Leyden Street leading to the brook. When the spring birds are singing, there are 7 houses standing at Plymouth Plantation with a common storehouse making an 8th structure. From west to east, the houses are the families of Edward Winslow, Francis Cook, Isaac Allerton, John Billington, the Reverend William Brewster, John Goodman, and Peter Brown. I have placed the storehouse at the east end here. The cannons are here on Burial Hill. On March 16th, the alarm sounds. The men take their station at the rendezvous. An Indian warrior is spotted approaching the village. He carries a bow and arrow. The lone Indian draws near, passing down the lane near the houses. The English halt the man at the rendezvous. The Indian opens his mouth. The pilgrims are astounded at what they hear. The warrior says, "Welcome, Englishmen.